So big news. I just found out something kind of buried in the fine print. If you have a subscription to ChatGPT, you can now use your subscription inside of Codex CLI. That's OpenAI's command line interface for coding. This means you can use Codex without an API key, which means you don't have to pay per transaction. It's just now rolled up as part of your subscription. While I'm sure there are limits, there is nothing yet published about what they are. So for now, I think OpenAI is just trying to let people kind of test it out, take it for a spin, kick the tires. This puts it on par with Claude Code, where if you have a subscription to Claude, you automatically get usage of Claude Code CLI. You, again, don't have to pay per usage. You don't need an API key. It's just all rolled up as part of your subscription. So today, I wanted to test Codex CLI against Claude Code CLI, the setup. So my test was to try and recreate something along the lines of a Zuma type game. In order to give both tools a fair shot, I created a product requirements document, a PRD. Well, I didn't create a PRD. I asked Claude to create a PRD. I basically told it I wanted a game that was similar to Zuma, and could you create a PRD? And it gave me a full product requirement description. This is beyond overkill. It's got timeline and scope, potential audience, potential selling price point, upgrades. This has far more information than I actually need, so I did need to pare it down to a web version of the game. But it gave both tools a level playing field from which to start. The other thing that I requested from Claude was a best practices coding guide, and I felt like this would give both tools an even playing field. Round 1. So in Claude, I was able to tell it, you have a PRD, I need you to build a game based on the PRD, and also there is a file that defines the coding standards. It seemed to take both documents and was off and running. Now, one of the things I have really come to appreciate about Claude Code is the ability to put it into planning mode. So I can tell it anything, and it comes up with a plan and a to-do list of what it thinks I am telling it to do and asks me if this is what I'm looking for. This gives me the opportunity to correct what I have inevitably forgotten to tell it or not gotten quite right. I tried to see if there was something similar in Codex. I didn't really see anything. I did try to go into the Codex documentation, but basically reading through it, I didn't see anything obvious that stood out to me. So the best I could do was kind of try and tell Codex that I had these two files and I wanted it to build a Zuma-like game based on the PRD, and it just shot out of the gate and started working on it immediately. But it did seem to at least take those in and work with them. So Claude Code now had this detailed list of instructions, and it started working and working and working and working. Meanwhile, Codex was off like a rocket and immediately came back and said, here's something, how's this? It was broken. So I told Codex, that doesn't quite work. Shot off again, came back again, almost immediately, gave me something else, also broken. This went on 3 or 4 iterations where it just kept giving me something that didn't work or wasn't really there or wasn't quite right. Meanwhile, Claude was happily chugging away, working on its code base. In the end, though, when Claude finally finished, the thing that it gave me also did not work. Codex was the first one that had something up and running. It just took a lot more back and forth. So I wouldn't say there was a clear winner, just a different workflow. Now, neither one had a working prototype right off the bat. I did have to go back and work with both models over and over and over to refine either the look or the playability of the game. So that brings us to the workflow experience. If you've used Claude Code before, you know what that's like. As it's working, it gives a summary of what it's doing and what the changes are that it's been working on. It's pretty easy to read through after the fact. Codex, on the other hand, tells you literally everything. It's like it is free association thinking, telling you every thought it has, every step it's taking, every reason for why it's taking those steps. I do think that they have left some setting on high as it's a new model and they're probably testing it and they are really wanting people to be able to figure out what it's doing and why it's doing it. The problem with this is it is like reading a novel. Every time it comes back and says, I've changed something, you are scrolling through pages about what it did and why it did it. And it is just very difficult to get a summary of exactly what happened and if it understood what you were saying and if it did what you said. Claude is much more summarized and actually better formatted, just making it much easier to read through a quick summary of what happened. So because of those differences, because you can turn Claude on to thinking mode, and because Codex, there is no thinking mode, it just goes off and does it, it feels like Codex is driving a car with no steering wheel and no brakes, just full gas. Kind of exhilarating, but a little bit out of control. All right, so how did they do? I will say Codex surprised me. It was the first one that got something passably running. It was the first tool that suggested sounds and power-ups. Claude Code seemed to have this reoccurring issue where it was showing me the ball that I was going to shoot and then the next ball in the queue, which is a very Zuma-like behavior, but it had sort of superimposed those. And I just kept going back and forth with Claude. It eventually had me open up the console and cut and paste what was literally going through frame by frame. I think there was a sprite problem, they were overlapping, and it just could not find that in the code to separate. So I spent so much time just trying to have a usable, visible version of Claude that Codex actually got the upper hand, and then I was able to spend time letting it add power-ups and sounds and more levels. That said, both games did have problems with actual usage. Codex kept giving me a very uneven, janky kind of path. At one point, it had a 90-degree turn where the balls were going around a corner, and I just couldn't get it to understand that that was a problem. I eventually had to take a couple of screenshots and paste them back into Codex and say, please, can you fix this? So I would not say that either tool was without problems, and I certainly wouldn't give the coding nod to either one. They definitely both had their strengths and their own set of problems. So one of the things that I've gotten used to in Claude and have kind of grown to love is the Claude MD file. That's sort of the brain for the project, where you can tell Claude to remember something by hitting the hashtag key, and it will write it to that file and save it and just remember it for the project or for a global level. So I've kind of come to rely on that central brain file system so that I can always go in and look to see if the project is doing something, or I can go in and edit it. If I need to add something, I can ask Claude to edit it and add something. Codex does not seem to have anything quite like that. There is a main file way up at the user level where you can specify a few things, but it's just not the same. You can ask Codex to remember to do something, but that's only good for that session. So if you exit out and come back in, it won't remember that it's supposed to do that as a project. They do have an agents markdown file that is supposed to do something similar, and maybe I just haven't worked with it enough to kind of figure it out. But for me, that was a piece that I just really felt was lacking. I again felt that sense of being a little bit in the dark and a little bit out of control as to how to make Codex do something that I wanted it to do. So after hours of parallel work, here's what I found. Codex was the first one to get something working, but there was just kind of a lot of mess in it, and it was a very uncomfortable feeling. I never was quite sure what it was doing or what it was working on. Claude was easier to work with, and it made me feel a little bit more comfortable, but in the end, it's not like it gave me a better product. And so both ended up in kind of the same place. There was a mostly working level 1 version of the game that I asked for. So this is Codex, and I will say, in the end, I got something. While it will not win any beauty awards, it is functional and honestly pretty impressive that it was able to put something like this together. And this is Claude Code, which once I had it kind of do a last minute update to make it just a little bit prettier and add sounds, For some reason, the sounds made it about 20 times more playable and enjoyable. As goofy as the sounds are, this just kind of made it a ton of fun. So in the end, I'm not quite ready for market for either one, but they are both good for a couple minutes of playtime. And so the main difference ended up being about the feel. Codex was kind of wild and chaotic, and Claude was a little bit more buttoned up and structured. And in the end, really, they both got the job done. So what is the takeaway? In fairness, it's possible that Codex has some of those features that I'm missing, and I just don't know where to find them. I have worked with Claude for about 6 weeks now, so I'm much more comfortable with what it expects from me. And so it's possible it's not fair that Codex is expecting something from me that I'm just missing, that I don't understand. The biggest takeaway, though, I think is that it's a win for everyone. If they are now including access to Codex CLI with even the $20 subscription to ChatGPT, which is what I have, that's 100% a win. We now have access to Codex and we don't have to pay the API fees. That's fantastic. It's definitely worth trying out for yourself, and I'm sure they'll be adding upgrades and features to it as we go. Biggest takeaway? Game developers, you guys are the real deal. Hats off to you. You've done some fantastic work over the years. All right, so that's it for today. I hope this was enlightening. I hope you go out and have a chance to play with either or both. Drop me some notes in the comments. If you feel like I'm missing something, I would love to hear from you and know about it. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.